Big Nick, there he is.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm driving, but I see you. How we doing?
No, that's perfect. Yeah. No, this is absolutely perfect. Because so you pay attention to the road, you'll just hear me just like normal. How you doing, man? You're looking great.
I'm doing good, dude. I'm a busy boy between the gym, all my clients. I'm kind of doing like the online food nutritional thing with some people. And then most importantly, the family. I got the 1-year-old.
That's right.
Is insane, dude.
That is so cool, man. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. I was watching the videos and the pictures of your boy's first birthday and your beautiful wife, and it's just, living the dream, man.
It really is, man. I always wanted kids, but everyone used to say, like, you'll never love something as much as you love your own, and like until you actually live it, like it's a real thing. It's pretty cool, man.
It's unbelievable. I'm blessed to have a 10-year-old daughter, and it's just every single year it just gets better and better watching her explore and learn new things, and you're going to see that with your son. It's going to be. I'm excited for you. Because
it's a cool thing for sure.
So I really appreciate you, taking the time to meet with me real quick, because there's a couple things I wanted to discuss with you very, very quickly. Because again, I know you're busy, so I'm not going to take up too much time. I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, and I just never had found the way to do it until I was talking to some people, and they're like, just worst thing you can do is just ask. So I'm putting together a couple documentary pieces for myself professionally, and I wanted to see if you are okay with, because I've been doing a lot of research on you beforehand, would you be comfortable of me coming up to Tampa and interviewing you about 2009?
Yeah, dude, that's cool. No problem.
Okay, so all right, so you gotta understand I'm sweating because I can only imagine like.
No, dude, it's honestly, so many people. It's part of my life. I tell people that all the time. It's something that happened to me, but it didn't necessarily. It's not gonna. How do I explain this? It's funny. I just had somebody going through some shit the other day, and he's postpartum, and not postpartum. Sorry. Post-traumatic stress disorder and things that happened in his life, and he kind of looked at me just like from what I experienced and stuff, and I was like, look, dude, I'm not what happened to me. That was like my life. Like, I'm not what happened to me. This is something that I was blessed enough and given another chance, and I'm going to take the frickin' best of it, you know what I mean?
So tell me about like young Nick Schuyler.
Childhood. I grew up outside Cleveland, Ohio. Fortunate enough, grew up sports, everything. Looked up to my sister, who's almost 4 years older than me. She was hardcore into softball and fast pitch, volleyball, basketball. I grew up playing football, baseball, basketball. High school played basketball, football. Decided to play football in college here at USF, but grew up in a small town outside Cleveland. Went to Kent State for 2 years, and then decided, if I'm ever going to move or I'm ever going to do this, let's do it now while I'm young. So moved down to Tampa just cause. Didn't go to school the first semester, which was probably the best thing I've ever done because it put things into perspective and reality, and things cost money, and mommy and daddy weren't going to pay for me anymore. Yeah. So went back to school, played ball. And that's the story. But totally different scenario. Love my Florida people, but they are not like my Ohio people, so I miss them dearly. But I'm glad it all worked out the way it did, because I'm in a pretty good place now, so very lucky.
How was the process getting onto the football field for University of South Florida? Was it a walk-on type of idea?
So
or?
that's kind of a unique scenario. So, long story short, I was, what's the word that I can say on camera? A moron. Decided to stop. Is that okay? That's okay.
Nick,
right?
you can say whatever the fuck
right.
you want, to
There we
be
go.
honest with you. I mean,
There was a tryout in early February. There was over, I believe, 155 guys. They invited roughly 20 of us to come to spring ball, winter conditioning. Went through spring, and then they kept 2 of us, which was pretty cool. So I was one of the 2 to make it, which is kind of unique. So super fortunate, met tons of guys, some of my best friends still, my best friend Will that passed. And yeah, that's where I am now. It was good. It was the first time, I was kind of going through a transitional phase in my life. I moved on here. I didn't know anyone. I had some friends of my sister's that, I could hang out with from time to time. The guys that I was living with, awesome, love them, but they weren't really. One guy was in the motorcycle thing. Another guy was, he was really into school. So it was a chance for me to be around, 100 plus guys, many of them being, and I'm not racist, whatever. I have tons of black friends, but many of them being black, fellow athletes. And so that was a different world for me, because being an athlete where it was probably 80% black in the locker room, where I didn't know anybody, and the way a college, team was run, it was definitely an eye-opening experience, but it was pretty unique, showing not only that I wasn't playing for myself, but I was playing for all these other guys too. So it was really cool. I learned a lot, some things I could change, but all in all, it was a pretty cool experience.
all right, so what we're going to do on this segment, Nick, is we are going to visit the date of February 28th, 2009. Tell me about that day, or what you remember about that day from the very beginning.
So Saturday morning, I'll actually backtrack a little bit. I had gone out the week before with Marquise and Corey. Went out to his same fishing spot. So anyways, they were going to leave town the following week. I didn't have the best experience. I don't love fishing this far. It was cold. I really don't know how to do shit. I couldn't do my own line even if you asked me to. I didn't know how to bait a fit, you name it. But anyways, my best friend Will, Marquise and Corey were going out one last time because they were getting ready to go to camp. So it was kind of like, let's do it again, 'cause it's gonna be a long time until we get to go out again. So anyways, he told me I could bring my good friend Will. So he was ecstatic. So the night before, he was up, antsy. He's like, I couldn't sleep, I'm so excited. So anyway, Saturday morning, we had to be up roughly, I want to say 4 o'clock, because we had to get out there early. We had to be Marquise's before, right around 5. Get out, gas up, and wanted to be at the boat launch as early as 6 a.m. Because where we were headed, one of Marquise's fishing spots were roughly 70 miles off the coast of Clearwater. Take about 3 hours to get out there. But yeah, normal day, normal morning. We were kind of up in the air because we knew there was a little cold front coming through, but the morning was a typical morning. Everyone's excited, I was smart because I learned the week before that I needed an actual windbreaker. So I brought a winter jacket, which would in turn would save my life. And then the weird thing about that too is because my best friend Will, several weeks prior, for New Year's Eve, he went up to New York City. He had my jacket. He borrowed my jacket, so I actually got it back that day before and wore it that fishing trip. Anyways, went out. Typical day. Water was a little choppier than normal. Like I said, it took about 3 hours to get out there. I ended up getting super sick, which was pretty miserable. So I was throwing up as early as, I don't even know at that point, maybe 2 o'clock. So my fishing experience that day was very short-lived. There was nothing I could do. I'm in the mercy of 3 other guys and 70 miles off the coast. And at that point, probably 4 to 6 foot waves, not too bad, but choppy enough in a small boat. So at that point, I had my winter jacket on. I sat there, shivered, threw up, dehydrated, And then as the weather got worse and worse, got a little cooler out, we're like, all right, we know this thing's coming. We should probably head out. And that's when we made the big mistake. The week prior, we lost an anchor. It was stuck in whatever that spot, which is was his favorite spot. There was several shipwrecks. I'm not really sure, or something like that. So there was tons of fish. So anyways, the week prior, we had lost an anchor. So go figure, this same time, we're getting ready to leave, and the anchor's caught again. Well, he really didn't want to use Marquise. It was his boat. Didn't want to lose another anchor, so we did several maneuvers, pulled it this way, turned the boat around, pulled it this way, couldn't get it out. So as a last-ditch attempt, we decided to hook that line, that anchor, on the back of the boat, give it up, give it some gas. If it comes loose, we get an anchor. If it doesn't, the line's gonna snap. Well, not exactly. So when we floored it, the boat shifted up, pulled us back down, and eventually flipped over. So you can imagine seas at, the beginning of, the end of February, beginning of March, middle of winter here in Florida. Conditions were around 61, 60 degrees, the water temperature. And at that point, we were probably in, let's say, 7 to 8 foot seas, but at the mercy of, Mother Nature.
When you were talking about the boat, the bow of the boat came up, and then did it roll over? Did it kind of roll over like a barrel roll? Did it get caught in a wave, or was it from the acceleration of the boat getting stopped abruptly and then it kind of rearing up like a spooked horse? What?
So it was actually from the slack of the rope. So you can imagine any type of marine rope will have some slack, and when it has that much pressure, so all of a sudden this thing is tight and it turned into almost like a bungee. So we take off, it brings us back, the bow has a ton of water in it, and then it's slow, it wasn't slow, but it's ducked.
Okay.
Which obviously caused us all to go flying in the water. And at that point, it didn't matter if we were in 2 feet of water. We weren't going to flip, leverage-wise, we weren't going to be able to flip this boat over in 150 foot of, 150 foot depth sea. So.
And that's how deep it was, approximately 150, give or take.
Yeah.
Okay. Now when all 4 of you entered the water, about what time was that?
God, it's been 10 years. Right around 6 p.m. 5:30, 6.
So this was later in the evening.
Yeah.
So sun's starting to go down.
Yeah. It was probably around 5. At the earliest 5, but 5:30 at that point. Yeah. 5:30.
Yeah. Now, with you being sick and not feeling well that day, what were you able to take in to ingest? Water, Gatorade, sandwiches?
I think I opened a single beer prior to that, which that obviously came up. I don't think I finished it. I don't know if I ate anything. So I really hadn't eaten anything since, I guess, whatever I had for breakfast, which was thrown up, and then whatever I had the night before was probably kept down. So really since Friday, and then I didn't eat again until I was in the hospital till I wasn't really eating. I had such salt and acid reflux that I lost 45 pounds in 5 days. Yeah, 6 days. Yeah.
Okay, so so the 4 of you entered the water between 5:30 and 6 p.m. What was your Nick? What was your first reaction when you entered the water?
So I remember that specifically because we used to jet ski all the time, and we had these 3-seaters, and as a joke we would splash each other, turn, and it would always dump. And every time it flipped, it was like this scary moment just because I'm flipping a jet ski, a motorized vehicle, into the water, but it's kind of funny, but it's kind of scary. So I don't know why, but this moment, like, oh shit, like we're going into the water. Well, obviously a much different situation. But even when it first flipped, I was like, oh my God, we'll be able to, come on, let's flip really quick back over, kind of like a jet ski. Well, no. And even later on, when we were trying to flip this thing, oh, it's still connected to the anchor. Let's cut the anchor, the line. It still didn't matter. All that meant now we were just drifting wherever, however. Not that we could tell because it was so rough at that point regardless. But instead of being anchored down, upside down, we can't flip this thing because we're anchored down. So we cut the anchor on like the prop. And then which still wasn't going to make a difference, but.
So at that moment when everyone entered the water, the boat was still attached to whatever structure
Correct.
was down below.
Yep.
Okay. Do you think that was a mistake cutting the anchor line, looking back, or
No.
or was it for the better interest that you guys did cut the line?
Probably best interest because at that point, later on we have 15, 16 foot swells being connected to an anchor line. I'm not sure that would have been a good thing. You know what I mean? Maybe it could have kept us in one spot, but if you're going up and down in swells, I can't imagine it. You know what I mean? We, of course, had tried to attempt to flip it. Corey kept saying, I can't believe we can't flip this motherfucker. You know what I mean? But again, it didn't matter if we were in a foot of water. At that point, there was no leverage. The boat was, several thousand pounds. So at that point, we're really just holding on to whatever we could. I think the majority of us were back towards the prop because there was, a swim platform, the prop itself, some kind of railing or handrail to hold on to, because obviously the top of the boat was smooth. There's not much to hold on to there. And just honestly trying to hold it together because we didn't really know at that point. I remember having a bag of like keys and phones. I was like, oh shit, I can't get this wet. I gotta hold on to this. And what if somebody loses their keys? Marquise had 20 keys on one keychain. That was like my biggest, don't mess this up, hold on to this, and then trying to get to the phones but not let them get wet so they wouldn't get ruined. That way we could use them because no one knew it was that severe yet.
All right. Now, when you guys huddled near the back of the boat, near the prop.
Yeah.
Did you guys try to get out of the water? What did you
we got
guys?
out of the water as much as possible. I was fortunate enough to kind of straddle the motor where I was, and then Marquise was on the front of the boat, kind of straddling, hanging on to what he could. He probably had the toughest job. It's not no one's. I call it just the way it worked out. And then Corey was the one that was kind of half in the water, where Will and I were out of the water longer, which in turn ended up being a good idea. But yeah, at that point, it seemed like every hour the conditions got worse and worse and worse. I mean, it was so loud, it was so windy, waves were crashing. And then what was happening was with this, now we don't have swells yet, we have just crashing waves. So we would all be on the boat, and then you could hear it, you wouldn't even hear it coming half a second later, and we would get slammed by thousands of pounds of pressure of waves and just be off the boat and then fight to get back on the boat. And that happened for 3 hours. You know what I mean? So yeah, imagine the toughest workout possible, being thrown, pitch black, you see white because you saw the boat, that's it, you know what I mean? You saw some white crashing waves, but loud.
Were you able to how were you able to communicate with all the other guys to know where they were, to make sure that everyone was safe? It was more, I guess, more of the questions like, you guys were out there, for hours and hours.
Yeah. We were all kind of just grabbing onto each other. So obviously we were fit, strong. The biggest thing was the unknown. So again, there'd be times where you could hear it coming, hold on, and I'm straddling this motor, and you can't imagine everything that's torn up from my freaking, chest all the way through my back. So you could hear things coming and hold on and grab each other, but there was other times where you wouldn't even know, and it would take you, 5 feet this way, but we'd grab each other. Obviously being in the shape we were, being former ball players, the love we had for each other, so we, I don't know, we just kind of did what we could, obviously, for as long as we could. I personally was in the water for almost 49 hours.
For 49 hours.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 24, 48. So you're out there for 2 days.
Yeah, I was out there. We got in the water just before 6, and I was rescued around noon on Monday, alone by myself.
Alone by yourself.
So Saturday around 6 p.m. and then Monday around noon. So yeah, the first night really, I mean, ultimately the 60-degree water, it doesn't even have to be that cold to start experiencing hypothermia after just a short time. So that was really, and again, none of us knew that, but that was really the deciding factor, even more than the actual conditions as far as the sea goes. So one by one, the weather, Marquise was kind of becoming incoherent, mumbling, saying some things, kind of.
What do you remember when you say, because I've read that he was, saying some things. Do you remember what he was saying, even though it was incoherent babble?
Just random stuff like, I got to get under the boat, I got to get this, I got to get the keys. Nothing specific, just random, like, no, dude, and that's when we were like, oh my God, what's going on? And then Corey was same thing, not far from, far behind, doing the same thing, saying random things. He was a little more aggressive, trying to kick away from the boat, get away. Again, neither one of them themselves. But yeah, hypothermia is a real thing, and it makes you do some crazy things. Scary. Well, what happened was Marquise was starting to get really rough. He was trying to get away from the boat, underneath the boat. So I kind of I decided to hold on to him. So he was literally lying across me here, his back against the propeller, or the prop. The propeller was facing you. And I bear hugged him like this, his feet on one side, his head on the other side, and literally fought with him it was probably about 2 hours. And the fighting got less and less and less until I had a feeling he was no longer there, and he wasn't. And that was probably, like I said, I'd have to really dissect these. Like I said, it's been 10 years, but at that point, it was probably 4 or 5 a.m. at that point. So we were in the water maybe 10 hours, give or take. Didn't seem like that long, but I guess it seemed like a hell of a lot longer. But it was probably close to 10 hours into what happened. He was probably 3 or 4 o'clock. Sadly, I had to let him go because at that point I knew he had passed. And Will and I kind of had this conversation with Will. At that point, I was like, if I don't let him go, Corey was not far behind fighting us. I was holding on to his jacket. He was trying to propel himself, kind of like a frog off the boat. I should say he was in the water, but propel himself further into the water. And if I didn't let go of Corey, I couldn't physically hold on to this strong-ass dude. So we made a decision to let go of Marquise and hold on to Corey at this point as long as possible. And then he eventually slipped out of my hands. And basically he was doing a leg press off the boat, and I'm holding on with 5 fingers. And then he passed as well. Again, neither one of them themselves. Hypothermia, the craziest shit I've ever seen. Sad scenario.
Corey and Marquise have passed on, and you and Will have had to make this indescribable decision. What was going on with Will while the two of you were alone in the water?
So you got to imagine now it was probably, call it 5 a.m., still pitch black, cold. The same thing, we fought. We'd be on the boat for 2 minutes, and then we'd get thrown from the boat. And then we'd be good for 5-10 minutes, and then got thrown from the boat. Tried to get back on, couldn't get back on. So we really played that game for the next several hours. In between all this, and when Marquise and Corey were still alive, we had saw, helicopters in the distance. Obviously, they couldn't see us. We were a white cap amongst many white caps. But at that point, Will and I just remember one thing specifically. He told me, and this is later in the day when it's probably at this point noon. It's a shitty day. There's not you can't see anything. Dark, dark. It looks like it's probably 7 o'clock at night when it was really only noon. The waves were no longer really necessarily crashing because they were huge swells, which I didn't know. The deeper the water, the deeper the waves. So you can imagine 150-foot seas. That's pretty big waves. So at that point, 15, 16-foot swells. we would go, one of the scariest things is we would go up a swell, and when we would come down, literally your stomach would drop every single time. We would go down, 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 down. The boat would go all the way under. We'd be holding on to this thing. We were straddling each other. We would go underwater, 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 and every single time we had no idea if that boat was going to stay up. We'd go underwater for 5-10 seconds, hoping this thing would float back up, and it did, fortunate enough. But Will made a comment that I'll never forget, and he told me, and I can't remember the exact time, it was probably around noon or so, Sunday, saying, I'm not going to make it another night. And I'll never forget that, because he said it right in my ear, and I didn't know what to say back. I don't remember what I said back, to be honest. I want to say I said, well, you're not going to have to, but I'm not even sure I did. But that's one thing I'll never, ever forget.
Will just mentioned to you that, he whispered in your ear that he knows that he's not going to make it another night. When, unfortunately, his premonition was true, when did he pass?
So, like I said, at that point, Will and I were kind of straddling the prop. I was closest to it. He was kind of bear hugging me. I noticed as the day went on, further into Sunday, that, don't get me wrong, the conditions did not get better, other than we could see. It was daylight. But he would go into the water twice as much that I did. Granted, I had better leverage. I'm holding onto a prop. He's holding onto me. It'd be like sitting on the back of a motorcycle. But he was going into the water twice as much. You could tell he was getting weaker. He had also spent tons of energy that day trying to get underneath the boat. He was able to retrieve like a bag of pretzels that were, waterlogged, but we tried to eat them. We split a Gatorade, which was huge. That might have saved my life as well. But at that point, it was probably around 5 or so. It was starting to get a little darker, and we kept going in the water, and again, we would get slammed. And one of the most painful things you can experience. Imagine holding this metal prop, and a 15-foot swell slams you. You go over the prop. We kept going in, and Will would be underwater. He couldn't even hold himself up, and I'd have to grab him and pull him up. Because at that point, I think we tied ourselves together with like like a wire, something that was connected to the prop, the steering mechanism, whatever it was. But we kept going in the water, and his head would be underwater, and I'd pull him up, and he was barely floating. And long story short, at that point, we went in again. I pulled him up again, and he was not there. He was no longer there. So I think, obviously, whether it was hypothermia or the conditions of him just drowning, the combination of the two, but yeah, I'll never ever forget that. Watching my best friend, eventually float away. I couldn't pull him up on the boat at that point. So, yeah. How you doing?
All right.
You all right?
I'm it's funny you say that, because this is a lot more than I expected.
To be honest, most people don't know the story. I mean, even a lot of people here don't know. So, you guys went out sea fishing, whatever. You went out fishing, and somehow with the anchor, but and all 3 guys pad, like they don't really know. Of course, I'm telling you a story now in whatever time frame, and it was a 48-hour story that we were in the water. So most people don't know all the details, or they pretend they do. They don't really know.
What can you remember going through your head while you were watching your friends and even your best friend as they pass? What is going through Nick's mind while all of these tragedies are occurring one after another?
A lot. We had nothing but time to think. So I remember telling my sweet mother over here, or not telling her, I wish I could tell her that she wasn't going to go to my funeral. That was one of the main things. But I must have said, and I'm not a religious guy, I think I've said this 100 times telling this story, but how many times I prayed and pleased God, but just hoping I'd wake up from this bad dream. I was hoping it was a bad dream at that point. I just kept replaying every single scenario that I just watched, with Marquise, Corey, and Will. Same thing, hoping I'd wake up from this terrible dream. And same thing I knew I had at that point. I had a long ass night ahead of me, because at this point now, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, it's getting dark. The weather, it was cold as shit, don't get me wrong. I don't remember the temperature, but the wind was crazy. So with the wind chills, at that point, to be honest, the water, this makes you think, the water became warmer than the air. So that's how cold it was. And the water was 60, 61. So you have wind chill. Not that I was going in the water to stay warm by any means. But at that point, I had a full night ahead of me. I remember it being one of the clearest nights I'd ever seen in my life. So I kept looking up at the stars thinking, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Paula, was looking at the same stars. And just praying. That's all I could do. At that point, I was so exhausted. I would doze off for, God, it felt like a half a second, it might have been a minute, and then all of a sudden I get nailed with a wave. I'd be in the freaking water, have to do it all again, climb back up. I could see, there was sharks earlier in the day from blood, which I used to be scared of sharks as a kid. At that point, I could give two shits. It was the last thing on my mind, because I had so much blood coming off my legs, coming off my ass. My ass was completely rubbed raw from the, people know, CrossFit people, your hands get wet, they get heated up, they get really soft. Well, imagine sitting in the water for 48 hours on a seat, a hall, scrubbing salt water. Yeah, so you can imagine I had second and third degree burns on my ass and crotch and everything in between. So there's blood everywhere. That was pretty bad. But yeah, that was the longest night of my life, to say the least, alone.
Sharks did come around?
Yeah, definitely 2 different sharks that we had seen. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's funny when you're in that type of situation. They were probably more scared of the boat than anything. They saw this big ass boat. I wasn't scared about a Jaws situation or anything like that. But you'd think I would be, because you tell me sharks now, I'm like, yeah. But yeah, between all the blood, sure.
What happened? How did they find you? What was the rescue effort
so
like?
Monday morning, I try to doze off or do whatever I can, hold on. But I remember Monday morning specifically, I started hallucinating. Yeah, which was pretty freaking crazy. I remember screaming. I was holding the hole, and I remember turning around and screaming, "I need water! I need fucking water!" And I must have done it 2-3 times, mumbling. It probably didn't even sound like that. And then all of a sudden I was like, caught myself. Like, holy shit, this is now happening to me. What happened to Marquise and Corey is now happening to me. And at that point I knew, oh my God, this is it. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try to go underneath the water, go underneath the boat. I knew a couple places specifically where there was water or some snacks. So I decided to take my life jacket off, go figure, because there was no way I was gonna dive underneath. I couldn't get underneath the boat without it. So tied it up to a wire that was there that we were using earlier that Will and I were connected with, kind of got into the water, made my way over to the boat. Attempted to go into the boat a couple times while this boat's going up and down. Went under, got my head slammed. Tried again, went under. At this point, you can't imagine how exhausted. I can barely hold myself up. So I decided to come back, watch my freaking life jacket drift off about 20, 30 feet away. So I knew I had to have my life jacket. So I went and got it. Felt like a marathon. Got it, somehow got back on the boat, and it was almost like damn Castaway, searching for whales. Like, it was that type of work. And then it wasn't more than maybe an hour later, I remember sitting there and taking a breath, and my heart rate at that point might have been, I don't know, 25 or 30. I mean, it was literally, yeah. I remember hearing something and kind of looked back, thought I saw something, looked again, thought I saw something, heard something, and at that point I told you I was hallucinating, so I didn't really know what to believe. And it was this big ass Coast Guard cutter a big ass ship. Probably 75 yards away, coming kind of in a 45-degree angle from my backside. And they came and honked their horn, stopped, clearly saw me. There's people on deck. I remember saying, "Thank you, God," maybe a million times. They kind of made an announcement. I thought I heard them. They lowered like a smaller, whatever, airboat or whatever it is, not an airboat, but a smaller boat where 4 or 5 guys were on it, and they were coming off the boat to come and get me. They made an announcement, "Stay put, we'll get you well." My ass was off that boat because I was done being on it. So I kind of dove into the water, and they got me a couple seconds later, and they pulled me on. Remember that? Damn well. Definitely a surreal and bittersweet moment.
All right, so the United States Coast Guard comes, gets you. They're on one of their, what's this called, inflatable dinghies.
Tornado, yeah, they're on a dinghy. Yeah.
They put you on there, and then they brought you to the main cutter.
Yep.
Now, from there, did they? What was that like? What were they asking you? What was the communication
main thing
like, if any?
I kept saying water, and they were giving me very, very, very little, which was pissing me off. But when you're that dehydrated, I guess you can't have that much because it can kill you. But they just kept asking me, "Where are your friends? Where are your friends? What happened? Where are your friends?" They must have asked me 7 or 8 times. They knew I was out of it, but I kept saying, "My friends are dead. My friends are gone. Where are they? Where are they?" I kept apologizing. "I'm sorry. I don't know why." But at that point, like I said, every couple seconds, "Where are they? Where are they? Where are they?" And it was the same concept when soon they had me air flighted by helicopter to Tampa General Hospital. At that point, we drifted more, but at that point, I was roughly 35 miles off the coast. So we drifted 35 miles. I'm sure we drifted every single way. It was more than that. But so they air flighted me to Tampa General, and then same thing. They were asking me, "Where are your friends? Where are your friends?" Because they were in a helicopter, and I had to explain to them that they were no longer with us.
What do you remember, if anything? Do you remember arriving at the hospital?
Yeah, I remember a lot. Because, of course, I saw 100 friggin' news channels and everything after that. So I saw, when they first pulled me off the helicopter, they pulled me onto, a stretcher on wheels. And before I even got to the door, there was, 100 news teams and whatever kind of yelling. They got me in the door. And then when I got to, I guess it'd be the emergency room, they were slowly they were slowly, cutting the rest of my clothes off. My clothes are already off. They were cutting me whatever the Coast Guard put me in, dry clothes, and getting different things on my legs and trying to warm my body temperature up, putting in IVs. I remember my family came in. I couldn't even keep my eyes open at that point. I was so exhausted. My mom was crying. My whole family was crying, of course. I told my girlfriend at the time that I couldn't wait to marry her. Well, now we have a beautiful young boy, and life is awesome. Paula. I remember, this is maybe too much, whatever. You told me I could say whatever I want. So I remember they had to leave the room because they were putting in a catheter, which, again, I told you how torn up, bloody I was at that point. I didn't know if that thing even existed, but they drilled this catheter, and then that was another experience of my life, being, completely alive and no sedation whatsoever. So I remember that specifically. But no, Tampa General, the doctors, nurses, and everyone was top notch. I remember I wanted everybody and anybody in my room. We must have got yelled at every single hour because there was too many people in the room, and I just kept saying I didn't care. They literally treated me like royalty, which at that point, which I'm not gonna lie, was pretty awesome. I did not feel entitled at that point. You know, they had the news team, the news channels on, every single channel and every single thing. It was so big, as you know, because of the NFL guys. So we watched some of that, but there was, I'm not exaggerating, we must have had anywhere on average from 8 to 12 people in the room, and we had food spread from Olive Garden to Chick-fil-A to more cookies to, there was like 5 different spreads. It was like a feast 24/7. So that was pretty cool. Now, granted, I couldn't eat hardly any of it, especially the first couple of days. I had such bad heartburn and indigestion from intaking so much salt water. I had kidney and liver damage. So there was, I mean, I was eating, they had me on some kind of IV solution to help with that, but I was eating Tums like they were Skittles. And actually that was one of the scary things, because I had people in there and I literally thought I was gonna have a heart attack. So, and that was like for an hour at a time. I had the worst heartburn imaginable. So that was scary. But again, everybody at Tampa General was pretty awesome, and all my support system throughout all of this has been incredible.
But not being an overly religious individual. You know, you did say that you did talk to God and all that stuff, and we're not going to go into that religious side, because I think you and I share the same beliefs, and from what I've heard from you. But with that belief of knowing that Corey, Marquise, and Will are here, and at the very least in memory. If you were able to talk to Corey now, what would you say to him?
I don't know. You know, I've never really thought about that, to be honest. That's a good question. I just tell him I miss him. I love him. He was tough. He was a badass. He had a swag. All of them did. They had a different personality in every way imaginable. They were all very humble. Corey, I don't know. To be honest, I knew Corey the least. But
Okay, well then let me rephrase that question then. Knowing that, okay, so that you knew Corey the least, what's a good memory of him?
that, his laugh. And I'm sure that's a memory, but that's one thing that I'll never forget, the way he laughed. Just big goon. Always was optimistic. Never really heard him bitch about anything. But his laugh, honestly. Down to earth, was straightforward, reliable. As far as fitness goes, we were always in the gym together. Busted his ass. All had kind of a similar goal, get better. And just a humble, good dude. You know.
Now the same question, if, with Marquise being around in whatever form we want to believe in,
Right.
What would you say to Marquise today?
Same thing, love him, miss him. Not that I had a falling out with his wife and daughter, but I no longer have contact with them, and just pray that they're doing great. I know they are, 'cause she was a strong person. Can't imagine what she went through, and that the world lost someone special. He was a special dude, and I think anybody that knew him knew that. Same thing, one of the most humbling guys, one of the most athletic guys I've ever seen. Kind of a weird build to be a linebacker in his position. Tall, lean, but just athletic as all hell. If he was taller, he'd probably play in the damn NBA, but good dude, miss him, love him. And he was even more humbling, quiet, but good dude. Yeah.
Now you can imagine what the third part of the question is. This is going to be the hardest one. That's why I saved it for the end. So with Will being around us in one way or another, what would you like to say to Will right now today?
First of all, I'd crack him a beer or whatever he was drinking. Will and I had a relationship I can't really explain. He's probably the only guy that I would let my wife kind of hang on, because she had the same relationship with him, loved him, just a good dude. What would I say to him? I don't know what I said. I would be so overwhelmed with joy and love. I miss him. I don't tell many people this, but every time I do, and it's just like, yeah, we all have our little scenarios when we do lifts or this or before we hit a big squat, and I always tap my tattoo and I said, let's get it, Will. So if you ever see me do a big lift in any competition, you'll see me hit my arm first. Let's get it, Will. Let's do it. Yeah. I got chills talking about that. But I mean, we even put Will on the whatever you call it, for our itinerary for our best man. So he's in our wedding. You know, he wasn't there. He was in our wedding, co-best man. I love him. Everybody around him loved him. I've never heard one person say one bad thing about Will. I think about how different my life would be now. I have great friends, and again, I'm fortunate and blessed to have all this around me, but I'd ever have a friend like Will. Will could do, it didn't matter what I said. Hey, Will, let's go. Okay. Hey, Will, let's do this. All right, sure. Will, let's do this. Yeah, you're driving. Didn't matter, dude. That was Will. And I've never met anybody like that. And I definitely miss that. I know my wife does too, because that was her best friend. But he's loved, he's missed by hundreds and hundreds of people. We hold a fundraiser in his honor every single year up at Crystal River here, where he grew up, just to remember him. And every year it's never easier. But good dude, his legacy really will. All three of them will always live on. I know through me anyways, so.